Hi, Lisa. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
Should we take a look at the show?
Yeah.
This is Nina Hole, and Nina lives in southern Denmark, and she's brilliant. And she has been very instrumental in developing contemporary ceramics in Denmark. And she focuses on architectural forms, house forms, and what I love about them is that they have this really strong relationship with, for example, the Hofmeister exhibition that was here at the beginning of last year. These really strong landscape forms, and then she does, in addition to this, so all of these are inverted house forms, so you can flip them up and do them in different ways. Here is a collection of a bunch of her houses, and she made some of these at my studio in Horne. But they're all the different firing techniques that she uses to create pieces.
Very different.
Yeah, and she does enormous firing sculptures as well, that are the size of 7 to 8 meters, and then they're fired in a performance thing.
Like
yeah.
The one you did.
Yeah, but on a huge scale.
Yeah.
And it's really remarkable. It's just a huge range of things. This one would be wood fired in the right close to the firebox. And this is actually red lead as a glaze. So it's very toxic, but it works just fine on.
It's beautiful.
It is. I really love these. And she'll fire these again and again and again, especially the larger pieces, until she builds up the surface that she wants on them. She'll have a piece like this, and then she'll put a first glaze on, and maybe it doesn't melt. Then she'll put another glaze on, and then she'll fire it again. And she'll fire it in a wood kiln, and then an electric kiln, and then a salt kiln, until it builds up a kind of richness of surface that she's satisfied with. I think she told me that she'll put up to 30 different layers of things and firings on. Nina's heart in two halves. But it's like a boat form, because she does work with boats too. I like this one a lot. Yeah. Just because I can see what happened here with it was just masked or something else was sitting there, and it's a process that I use too. And there's the X's again. She'll play with things, and she takes a long time to do stuff.
Yeah.
Then these were at an exhibition in Copenhagen at Gallery Norbu, and you can see here it's flaking off.
Yeah.
The slip is too high temperature to melt in the firing, but it's not a problem here. There's lots of.
This is so rustic.
Yeah. They're great.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
It's really good because I know peaceful eye. It's just been lying in someone's backyard.
It does, like it's rusting, and it's got all that color inside. She must have been pretty happy with this piece.
Yeah.
I would think she'd be happy.
Yeah.
I love this little detail here too. It's nice.
Yeah.
The way it's just kind of barely attached. And the crawling of the glaze with a little color underneath. It's hard to know what's planned and what's accidental with Nina's work. It's so kind of deep and cavernous, and I think you really do want to. It would be hard to have it in your home and not go over and touch it and be really curious about it. And there are sharp places on it too, and. But I love the way it breaks here from blue to turquoise to black. we should go and look at Tove's work, I think. So Tove was somebody, Tove is the only person in the show that I didn't know, and she is one of Denmark's best known ceramic artists. So she made these pieces especially for this show. And they have just really kind of a voluptuous, alluring quality to them. And they're fired in an electric kiln, and she does a lot of work with different glazes, and they have kind of softness about them. Yeah. That's really a pleasure. And then here on the other side you have this completely different series of fluted pieces. And they're a bit of a puzzle because they don't appear to be thrown. I mean, you can't see throwing marks coming up. I don't know how she made these. I'm guessing she used a mold there. So maybe she used a band of clay into a plaster mold and a band of clay and press molded them in and then took them out, and then, but it's not easy to figure out, and they're all different. But it's not easy to talk about or describe these pieces. And I've seen them before in books and illustrations, and they haven't really captured me, but seeing them in person is quite extraordinary. And coming back, and that's the way it is with good work, I think. You don't immediately recognize that it's the quiet things that sneak up on you seem to have the most value, and you get attached to them over time. For me, this screams out Danish design, porcelain, smooth, slick, Scandinavia, 1978 kind of things. But it's very much her own personal work. And it's also very, very contemporary. And then she's got this very large piece over here. Yeah. I mean, she's saying that these are body forms, isn't it? Yeah. Krop I blåt.
Yeah. Body in blue.
Body in blue. And she's making these glazes up herself to fit the piece. Tove seems to be aiming for a target. She seems to be wanting to shoot one arrow and hit the bullseye. Whereas Nina seems to like the process of having lunch before you get up and string the bow and put the arrow in, and maybe you need to replace the feather, and then you draw but it's not so right, and then you shoot but you miss the target, but it was fun. And then you think, well, I'll get to the arrow, we come back, we think about it for a little bit. Maybe I was just a little bit high last time. Maybe I shoot at a different target. And in that is what's really fun about Nina as well. So you've got this balance between shooting really precisely for the target and hitting it. And really enjoying the process of it. But I'm sure Tove enjoys the process of it as well. And I'm sure Nina aims for things and hits them, but you can really see a difference in these. So then we'll see Eva Zethraeus. Yeah, so she's working with different organic forms. This is an extension of her MFA show from a decade ago, and the large sculpture or installation here on the wall is something that has emerged from a project that she did for Linnaeus's 300th birthday. Linnaeus was from Gothenburg, Sweden. And she did a series of polyps emerging, growing, expanding, and then senescing. And this installation has evolved out of that, but she has also been working for the first time with silver and moldable metals. Now, the commonality between Eva's work and Nina's work and my work is a directionality of exposure to flame or chemicals or glazes. But in Eva's case, all of these pieces are fired in an electric kiln. And the directionality comes from the way that she applies the the glaze. What she does is she airbrushes on between 3 and 7 layers of the single glaze that she uses with some colorants. And when she does that, they develop a strong side and a weak side, an updraft and a downdraft. You can see on this piece, for example, that she sprayed from this side and left a layer of the blue colorant right there.
Yeah.
If you look at this one here, for example, there's 4 or 5 different color regions. And then she's put this silver on top, but not spelled out.
Yeah.
Here you can really see the glaze application.
Yeah.
And the shadow.
The first time I saw this thing.
Yeah. But I do love that wall. I do love that wall. I love the wall.
Spent hours looking at
Yeah.
it.
This is really fun. They're all just installed and mounted on a nail, and they have a hole in the middle, and then you have it on, and you can choose which way you want to have it. Now stay on the wall. Okay. But it's really, really fun work. Then over here we have kind of a still life setting. Similar glazes, but working with her antelope or coral forms. And she started making all of this box work as a landscape installation when she was in Japan, in Shigaraki. And she was there for 3 months and was working on landscape and gardens and ideas of place and variation. And so she made a large thing. The first installation was actually on the floor. And it was hills that went up. She had some boxes that were this tall, but they were all square and fit like a puzzle together. You can see that on her website if you look. And these are pretty dramatic.
I thought they were quite disturbing when I first saw them.
I think they are too. And they're scary and they're fragile. And they aren't easy to understand, but they're kind of, I mean, the colors suggest marine life or maritime things, and they're thrown on the wheel, all of them, and then connected, and you can really see her use of the application of color. Yeah. Tree, swaying branches, gray branches, 1, 2. Proud branch. They look like antelope horns too.
Yeah. They also look like something that could come and get you. I mean,
Yeah.
searching for some
They do. Yeah.
prey.
Something to be out after you. Or microbes or molecules or pollen, dusts. All right, we might as well head into this next room and look around. This room is spectacular, but it's enormous. It just dwarfs all my pieces, and those big white walls up there. But yeah, well, this is this is a room with my work in it, and it's various pieces that are wood and salt and soda fired, and there are 2 major people in my artistic development that I worked with. One is Warren McKenzie, who's a potter who lives in Minnesota near the Twin Cities, and he and his students developed something called American Chino. Chino glazes have a very low melting point, and they melt before all the carbon is burned up and burned out of the glaze. On the other piece, you can see this huge place where ash just collected and gathered and is starting to run down the piece. This is a really fun tea bowl. It's in Japanese it's hiki dashi kuro. It's pulled out black and let it cool. It's a lot like raku, but 300 degrees hotter. This piece and this piece represent the other person who's most influential on me, my Japanese teacher, Shimaoka Tatsuzo, who died last December, so 13 months ago now. And he was famous for using rope patterns to impress his work and then to inlay that in the Korean style. And then here you've got ash. This was fired on
When is the right round? Is it? I mean, is it during the firing? Or?
No. When you're painting it on, you have to catch the right moment to put the next layer on. If you wait too long, it falls off. And you have to do that 5 or 6 times. And this pot's fired on its side, on seashells, on a post here. And then the flame came, and the ash fell here. The flame hit it, and then it rolled down the shoulder of the pot here. Yeah, it's a mark from a shell. And shells are really nice to work with. And this is a Chino. It's actually the same glaze as those two races.
Okay.
This is from the first group firing we did, and it was fired on its side like this, and then the ash hit here and ran down. And but it is cracked, actually, and it's a firing crack that would probably be filled with gold in Japan. They fill these kind of things with gold, and then, or with lacquer, and then they put gold on it to make it conspicuous that it's been repaired. Because it's not a flaw, it's a plus on some pieces that they have broken. You can see that there's a patina here, kind of metallic luster. That's because we heavily reduced it at the end. This is porcelain from Norway. It's from a firing in 2005, and these were stacked upside down on each other. So this pattern, you can see that those are similar, and that's because they were fired like this in the kiln.
I think this is beautiful. This line in here.
It's the only time we got these crystals. You can see there's even rings in them. Beautiful. Sometimes I get a little bit about like this, but never anything as spectacular as this. Look at that in there, that's really...
Yeah.
But it's nothing, I mean, it's just the process. It's the kiln, and I put the pots in, and we fire, and you get spectacular things that are really interesting, and sometimes you can repeat them, and sometimes you can't. You always need to be very appreciative about things, I think. These were fired over in Sweden. Actually, that's not true. These were fired in the Anagama, and then I refired them in the salt kiln. That is one of the very first pots that I fired with laser salt instead of regular salt. It's got an ash glaze on it, and it was a piece I did to practice for. I sat down on my wheel, and in about 30 minutes I made 50 tea bowls, because I really wanted to play with this idea of groups of pieces, making them at the same time, glazing them the same way, firing in the same kiln, but looking at the differences.
Yeah. Okay. What's the difference in between, because you noticed firing with laser salt?
But you'd think it's just salt is salt, but it's not. When you if you think of table salt, the really fine salt, when you put that in the kiln, it goes. You can hear it kind of steaming. And when you take rock salt, like rye salt, road salt, and you put that in, it goes crack, as it explodes inside the kiln. But then with the laser salt, it's this really fine matrix of big particles, and it's soft, and it's got a lot of water in it. So when you put the laser salt in, it hisses, and it goes. It has a more of a softness to how it's getting deposited on the work. Then the other thing that it has a lot more calcium and potassium, and that's significant because those chemicals are really close to wood ash. These pots are examples of me working with Nina, and they were fired first in the Anagama kiln in the spring of last year, but then they weren't fired high enough, and I thought they needed something more. So instead of putting them back in the Anagama, I thought I'll put them in the soda kiln, and the ash melted, and was really, it brings out the pattern and the colors and things. This one was standing up, and the ash hit it strong here on this side, but then it's not so abrupt, the transition. Before it kind of fades around. But if you put it on its side, gravity and the ash falling makes this really strong transition, because there's ash falling everywhere, and it can fall and be deposited anywhere on the pot. But from this line over, it can't stick there. So it just falls down. So you get this dramatic, vivid place where the ash just stops. And this black mark on this one is an example of potter's tears. My salt kiln has been fired over 50 times in the last 5 years, and it's developed a layer of glass with beads on the top, and those beads drip down when the kiln gets really hot. They fall, but they don't just drop splop. They're viscous, they're glass. They come down, and I can tell from the way they deposit themselves in places, they swing back and forth as they're coming down, and then they stick somewhere. When they stick, the rest of the thing falls down and touches and deposits. And they tend to get your best pots. They're objects that are made to be in someone's hand, and they have a weight to them, and a feeling, and they change over time as you use them. They get softer and quieter. It's kind of like people. You can feel there's a rough spot here. Each of these groups of pots was made within about 30 minutes. So it was about 1 minute per pot. And then I made 50 different pieces in each group of tea bowls. I finished them all at the same time, and then I fired them all in the same firing. And I wanted to show how different even work that was made at the same time with the same clay and fired in the same kiln with the same glaze could be. And I think it succeeds in that. No? Oh yeah, oh that's great. That's a calcium inclusion in the pot. My teacher's teacher said it's better to make outstanding pots out of bad material than bad pots out of good material. These are the last group of pots that I made before the exhibition. It was about a week and a half before the show, and I was just praying that firing would come out okay. And it didn't just come out okay, it came out really, really, really brilliantly. Like, look at that.
Yeah.
Whew. Nice color. It was one that Nina wanted.
Just here.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the salt. And these are laser salt too. And laser salt is dumped directly on these pots. And in laser salt there's a lot of impurities, other minerals that are being... So that's some of the laser salt, the white solid mass that's in the salt. And when I took them out of the kiln, they still had salt in them up to that white line. And then it just washes out. And straw ash has a melting point that is very rapid. So in about 10 degrees it goes from being completely dry, like this piece is. See how it's dry, 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 and has this texture there. Here it's a little bit more temperature, but it's still, it's really just barely fired hot enough. And then about 20 degrees later, you've got something like this, where the glaze is totally fluxed out and glassy. It's a little remnant of the whiteness to it.
It seems like this glaze is a lot thicker than on some of your other.
Yeah, it is. When you put it on, it's really thick looking. Here, you can look and see this one was hotter and this one was in a similar position, but this one was very quiet and down near the bottom. So these are very special bowls from a firing that we did north of Gothenburg. And Helena Hoy is Norwegian and she lives on Leso. And I commissioned this lid for the pot for an exhibition that I had at the Japanese Embassy in Copenhagen. But that's most of the exhibition, Lisa.
Yeah.
Now what do we do? These are nice. I don't have to apologize for this exhibition.
No.